podcast focused on trends shaping the future of manufacturing. I'm Alexandria Burek, your host, here with A.W. Schultz, two thought leaders with a passion for people and manufacturing. Today and every episode, we are diving deep into the advancements, sustainable practices, and dynamic changes transforming how we produce everything.
And now welcome Alexandria Burek and A.W. Schultz.
Well, hello, this is Factor the Future with Alexandria Burek and myself, A.W. Schultz. And today we're going to be talking about factory motivation and how to drive engagements on it. And prior to us getting on here, we had a little bit of conversation about different tools that we've seen or used in the past on how to drive employees' engagement. Because as you know, if you don't have engaged employees, you're going to stumble. And these are kind of things that lead to workforce demotivation, high increases in turnover, and the ongoing thing of training up new employees as you bring them in. So keeping them engaged and keeping them focused is one of the unwritten kind of soft tools that are out there that can be applied. And certainly when you talk about Factor the Future of Industrial 5.0, that human-centric approach plays a pivotal role in driving performance.
Yeah.
So what I wanted to do is actually start with Alexandria was going to share with us what she has been doing in her meetings to drive motivation and engagement within the groups.
Yeah, AW, thank you so much. I think one thing too is to think about here, people don't quit companies, they quit shitty managers. So, if you can be a good manager and you can show that you actually care about your team and foster this culture of caring about each other, I think it just levels up everybody's work and commitment to the business and what we have to do every day. In the meetings that you referred to or that we were discussing, I started this activity, in my business, there's a lot of stuff where it always feels like negative, like we're not doing this, we need to be doing this, this is too much, this is not enough. Like everything almost sometimes boils up and feels like kind of negative, like we can't win. And in transportation, there's no shortage of problems, a lot like maintenance, something's always breaking down, it's always a fire drill. Unless you've got really good preventative maintenance practices in place, right? But I wanted to do something to counterbalance that kind of creeping negativity and just kind of downness that was circulating amongst our group. So I made everybody come to this meeting that I host every other week. It's an hour long. There's maybe about 10-ish people on the meeting. And I said, we're going to start, before we talk about any single business item, everybody has to come to the table with a professional and a personal win. And this has really helped with engagement on that meeting. I noticed that we had some really great conversations spark from some of the personal and professional wins. We work with a group that is spread throughout the entire country, so we're not physically in the same factory or location, and so it's easy to lose some of those moments where you get that camaraderie. So it brings the camaraderie to the meeting of a dispersed workforce. It increases people's engagement throughout the meeting, and one of the most, I think, beneficial experiences of it has been one person talks about their professional win, and then it turns into something that we roll out throughout the entire country to positively benefit the organization. So while sometimes, to probably more traditional or old school managers, that would seem like a waste of time, 15 minutes spent talking about professional and personal wins. But it's really sparked some great conversations and opportunities for us to improve the business, improve what we're doing and bringing to the organization. So I stand by it, and I think that more organizations, more managers, more companies can bring that into their day-to-day, which you were sharing a little bit about. So why don't you share what you were kind of telling me about that sparked the topic for today?
Yeah, I was it came to me that I was doing some research on motivation, and I was trying to think of some past histories that I've been a part of. And for me, it was actually a semiconductor plant I was working at, and they had an approach. They had a very tiered approach to their meetings, and I guess the daily meetings necessarily they didn't do this, but when you start working with the supervisors and the managers meetings, they had like a tier ones would be the daily meetings, the tier twos would be the managers kind of supervisors meetings, and then all the way up to the general manager, the plant manager. But within the middle meetings, the tier twos and tier three meetings, we were calling them, they would start off with a health check, an individual health check. And I seen this twice. And one was it's on a scale of 1 to 10, how did you feel? And the other one, they would just have like smiley faces or sad faces.
Yeah.
And I remember, having to shadow in this meeting, like, oh gosh, they're gonna ask me what my number is, and I think I start off. I'm a 9.
I'm fine. I'm great. I've never been better.
Yeah, I'm great every day. But it was interesting as it went through. But it because ultimately I was worried. Is like as soon as they asked me what's my number, and if I'm telling them the truth, the next question is why. If I'm a 3. Well, I dinged my car coming to work today, and couldn't get the kids out the door in time. All this other personal stuff, the
life stuff that actually happens, and
the personal stuff starts coming out. But what I started to realize is that these are the kind of things that affects everybody on a daily basis.
Yeah. So
ultimately, it's turned into a little bit of a therapy session. And it's kind of opening people up, especially people that are introverted, they don't want to talk about it. But once you start talking about it, people start having a sense of, care.
Yeah.
And when you start having people care about it, they start being engaged about it.
Yeah.
And it was where I've seen it happen, these people have a good relationship.
Yeah.
And especially if you're working in a toxic environment, when you're forced to have to talk about what's going on, what are the problems you're having.
Yeah.
And, oh, by the way, that nasty email that Jane sent to Jill last night and really upsets you, maybe that comes forward and we talk about that.
Yeah.
But I see your point, and I wanted to ask you, rolling that practice out, I imagine must have had some tension to it, saying that this is going to take up how much of my time each day? I got things to do. I'm reacting. Yeah. I'm still working on all the stuff, firefighting, all the other stuff. So I was hoping you could put some clarity to like, what did you see as some of the roadblocks that helped you be successful in this?
So some of the points of friction, I would say, the people that are on this call, especially I will call them frontline workers, is what I like to refer to them as. They're the ones day to day handling all of the operations of our teams. And I know what it's like because you're just inundated with this. You're inundated with everybody else's stress, and you're kind of just sadly receiving it. I was just talking about this on my other podcast for the episode that came out today. And it's like you have to create a barrier of negativity. As time has gone on, I've seen people's moods in general, I would say, improve, at least when we're talking in the context of this meeting. Some people were like, I don't have anything positive. And I was like, okay, you know what? That's fine. Like, I'm not going to push you here, but it's like, surely you could find something positive. Like, I've been through major depressions and struggled suicidal thoughts. And even then I was able to find 3 things that went well today, 2 things that blah, 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 and 1 deep compliment to myself, because that's what pulled me out of depression. But I didn't want to push them. I'm like, okay, and other things I've noticed is that people start getting reliant on repeat positives. So I started calling people out. I'm like, you can't say the same thing every time. You said that you had a good weekend. Every time we've had this meeting, the last 3, well, I pay attention. It's like, I'm actually listening to what you're saying. And so I think it forces people to just have that moment for their own self of like, oh, actually things aren't so bad. But I think in general, because it's once every other week for 15 minutes, the pushback hasn't been too much. For the people that are just struggling, like, it offers an opportunity for us to also just extend grace to them. Like, if somebody's coming to that meeting, like, I don't have a single thing to be positive about, and then something later happens, it allows me to step back and say, okay, this person might just need more of a big hug in the moment. They might need to vent more in the moment than needing actual solutions. It's kind of like the same skills you would apply in your personal relationships, like with your wife or your spouse or your husband or whatever, where it's like, do you need me to problem solve, or do you just want to tell me about this? And I had that situation come up yesterday where somebody was really frustrated about something. They were right to be frustrated, but I was like, dude, I'm going to say, I understand what you're going through is frustrating, but like, do not let this kill your vibe. Like, this is not worth it. Like, you are getting a little excessively agitated about the minute. I was like, you won't even know that this happened a month from now. Let's get it in check. We'll take the right steps to address what's bothering you, but like, don't let this kill your vibe with your family tonight. Like, let's create a guard here. Like, this is so insignificant in the grand scheme of life that, like, to let your nervous system get this freak out mode over something so small is just not a good way to be a human, in my opinion. So I've been trying to help my coworkers with that stuff. I guess those are more like blue, white collar, mid management, maybe mid to low management. Probably around the same as what you would expect or what you would kind of classify in a factory. So like, what was some of the stuff that came out of those conversations that kind of surprised you when you were kind of the one in the meeting and having to participate, or being kind of like pulled into this conversation?
Well, as being an outsider, because I was in a consulting role at this facility, it really forced me to, share personal thoughts about myself, and it helped a lot on building that chemistry between people that didn't know me at all. And, oh, by the way, I'm the person that's coming in here to help you. And they're like, I don't want any help. And it helped me just learn a lot about everybody out there, where often it has to be done on a person by person basis, where right then and there, I've got an in for them.
Yeah.
A connection point that I can relate and talk to about them. So that made it very powerful. The other thing I was going to mention, that I don't know if you said, like, this was a meeting that your superiors are also attending, right? So so that makes it even more difficult to get some of the buy-in, because they could just easily say, Alexander, you're wasting our time. We don't have time for this, and blah blah blah. And you got your dick boss that's out there, but to say that. But I've also I've had to be the person that comes in and actually tells them that you need to have a cadence to your meetings, a structure to it. That's usually one of the first things that goes into an assessment, especially when you're looking at factories, is like, how does the communication process go? Because you were asking me on a previous podcast, like, tell me about CMMS and what goes into planning and scheduling. And the first thing I jumped to is the meetings, having structure to these meetings.
Yeah.
And that's a pivotal part. What other thing I wanted to ask about is, and I don't have a great answer to these, but I do have some things that I've tried in the past, is the logistics of it. So how do you make sure that meeting meets the objective? And most particularly, starting on time and ending on time.
Yeah.
Have you ever, I know you've had experience with this. If you've done held meetings, you've had to deal with this before.
Oh yeah. So I agree on the cadence, and the way that this came to me was actually via social media stuff. Is like, people love consistency. That I had this aha epiphany of, like, when you do social media posts in the same way, it's like a branded way of projecting out to the world. It like sucks people in, because we as humans just really like consistency. We like kind of knowing what's going to happen. So I agree on the cadence. I think that just having some routineness to these meetings, gives the people just some comfort and some, like, they know what to expect throughout the meeting versus this constant state of unknown. The meetings do occasionally run long, and it's sometimes I kind of just let it happen. Like, if we're having really productive and good conversation and people stay on, I'm like, you know what, this is what we're here for. This is the objective of the meeting. I'll typically loop in my equals and or superiors ahead of time and ask if they have any topics. So I kind of have an idea of how much time I need to fill, or how much time I get if they've got priority topics. And then we kind of talk about how we're going to work that in throughout the meeting, and like kind of what order. I start with like our leadership subgroup and get their stuff, and then we kind of incorporate and weave it all in together. A lot of times the stuff that we all have to bring up is relatively interwoven with the next person or the other person's things, just because that's what we're all working on as a leadership team. But yeah, I would say when the conversation is flowing, I try to like savor that and foster it and keep it going versus be rigid and say, well, it's 11 o'clock. Sorry, guys. Thanks so much for talking to me. It's time to go. Bye. Sometimes people, and we all don't have that luxury, but I think there is something to kind of riding with the wave and allowing things when they're at the high vibe to stay there, and it kind of like let that play out, because there's a lot of good things that come. And then there's other times where I'm like, well, I guess this is it. We've all said what we've got to say. No, definitely don't try to keep people on meetings just because the time is on the calendar. Have you brought this concept or this practice to any of your other clients, and have they, continued it? Did you ever have any checkpoints with them, maybe a year later to see if it stuck, or if there was anything, kind of like noteworthy that came of it?
Yeah. And I like the question, but I mean, I don't go in there and say your cadence must be this. They need to agree on it and determine it. So usually it's, I facilitate it and help bring in, cause to it. And it's, it's got to keep it simple, right? And it's got to be value added. Don't have people there that don't need to be there. Yeah. Some people want to show up just to be seen. And some of these meetings just go on for way too long. I was in, where was I at? When I was in Ghana, I had asked to attend their daily meeting. And initially, I think they knew I was going to be there. I'm the outside person sitting in. So they orchestrated very well. Unfortunately, it was going way too long and I had to leave to get back to my workshop. But yeah. They have to agree on it. And where I've had in the past where I've run meetings, I'll start off with something, funny I found on the internet, or, share a joke, or, maybe we have rules that, the last person in has got some obligation to push in all the chairs at the end. Cool. Or if all else fails, you bring donuts, right? And that'll usually get things going. But there's many different ways, and there's always tweaking it. But those have been some of the tactics that I've used in the past, and it's had. I mean, if you keep to it, like you said about cadence, usually when they know they're coming, it's going to be okay. Negative meetings, I've been a part of the toxic community where they have meetings before the meeting so that they've got all their,
and then they have to have a post meeting to go over the meeting.
Yeah, where you got the two different departments, maintenance and operations, and they're citing ways like, should we have seen this coming? And we saw it coming. We actually told you. We pulled those reports up, and they're trying to find that gotcha moment, and their superiors see it. Those are the toxic moments. And I think that if you started your meeting out with that health check, I think it might have some benefits to it. And if you do it, at least try it for 30 days, do that 30-day challenge and see what to do. And, always be open to tweak it if needed.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that. I think, being less less rigid, more approaching life in general, business in general, from this experimental approach. Tim Ferriss talks about this. Like, he goes, I just run a lot of experiments in my life, and like I've taken that and it's been profound for me, especially in the last year, just like, oh, I'm gonna experiment with this. And it just kind of changes the undertone of like, oh, I'm gonna rigidly change my whole life, versus I'm gonna experiment with working out every day and see how I feel after 30 days, or I'm gonna experiment with having this health check for 30 minutes, or I'm not going to be rigid. I'm going to ask the team, how can we make this meeting more enjoyable, and how can we make it something that people look forward to versus dread? You know, like, I think having reducing rigidity where possible is a great way to organically let, you know, kind of the meetings and things kind of unfold in a even better way than we envisioned from the get-go. You know, they evolved that way. Yeah. Are we clocking out?
Yeah, I think this is a good part to come to a close for this podcast. This is Factor the Future with Alexandria Burek and A.W. Schultz, and we're out of here like finished goods.
Yeah.
Stay tuned for next time.
Bye.
Goodbye.
That was really.
This is Factor the Future, and we are out of here like finished goods. Stay tuned for our next episode of Factory of the Future, where we're exploring groundbreaking techniques and behaviors that are reshaping industrial landscapes. Don't forget to subscribe and leave us a review, and help others discover the cutting-edge insights transforming manufacturing as we know it.